Om Apyayantu mama angani va pranaschakshushrotra madhu balamindriyani cha sarvani sarvam brahma upanishadam maham brahma nirakudryam mama brahma nirakarut anidakaranamastu anidakaranam mestu Tadatmani niratiya upanishatsu dharmaste mayi santu me chayi santu. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om. Now, as announced earlier, our topic is the dialogue between the great sage Uddalaka and Swetaketu. It's a great dialogue in the Chandogya Upanishad. As you know, we have 4 Mahavakyas. It's called 4 fundamental statements which expound the essence of Advaita philosophy. One is the famous Lakshana Vakyam, sometimes called Siddhanta Vakyam. It's called Prajnana Brahma, which comes in the Aitareya Upanishad, which is Rigveda. Then we have this Tat Twam Asi, which is Upadesha Vakyam. It comes in the Chandogya Upanishad, belonging to Samaveda. The third one is Siddhanta Nididhyasana Vakyam, Anusandhana Vakyam. It is Ayam Atma Brahma. It comes in the Mandukya Upanishad of Atharvaveda. And the fourth one is Aham Brahmasmi. It comes in the Vrihadaranyaka Upanishad. That is Shukla Yajurveda. Is Anubhuti Vakya. So these are 4 important statements. So a teacher instructs the disciple with this Upadesha Vakya, that is Tat Twam Asi. That is the subject of discussion today. The teacher tells the student that the Atman, the immanent, omnipresent reality that you are searching everywhere is within you. It is yourself, Tat Twam Asi. There is a traditional way of interpreting this Mahavakya. Then I will come to the dialogue proper. Tat Twam Asi. So this Mahavakya, this great statement, contains 3 words. Tat means that absolute reality. Twam is you, and Asi means is or is, like that. That reality that you are searching for is you yourself. So this instruction is repeated 9 times in this particular context. That is 6th chapter of Chandogya Upanishad, which belongs to Samaveda. So it comes in the 6th chapter of Chandogya Upanishad. So the same instruction is repeated 9 times. Each time when it's instructed, the student, student who happens to be his own son, Swetaketu, the teacher is Uddalaka. The Swetaketu, Bhuya eva mam Bhagavan Vijñāpayatu. Please teach me again, please instruct me again. He requests his teacher, his own father, to instruct again. So, there are 9 instructions, 8 questions. First instruction is given, then the student asks the teacher to repeat the instruction. So every time the teacher repeats the instruction, expounds the instruction, with the help of an illustration. These illustrations are so marvelous and it's supposed to be one of the most glorious parts of these Upanishads. So the instruction proper begins with the 8th Brahmana. Total, this chapter, 6th chapter of Chandogya, has got 16 Brahmanas, 16 sections, and at the end of the 8th section, the teacher makes an important statement. The statement is this: in fact, it contains the Mahavakya itself. Saya esha anima aitadadmimidam sarvam tat satyam sa atma tattvam asi shvetuketu idi. This is the instruction. Look here, Shvetaketu, the teacher, who happens to be the father of the student, addresses Shvetaketu. The teacher's name is Uddalaka. The student is Shvetaketu. This subtle Atman, this subtle principle that I explained to you, which is called Sat, the source of the universe, the central principle of existence. It is all this creation. This Sat, which is the self of all this, the essence of all that exists. It is called Etadatma. All these phenomena, the entire universe is endowed with this Atman, this self. And through this self, which is the essence of the whole creation, it is called Sat. And this reality, you yourself, this subtle principle, is the only reality, and that is the Atman, the self, and you are that Sat, this Atman. I mean, the reality that you are searching, seeking everywhere, the reality which is the essence of the whole creation, is the Atman. It is you yourself. So this is how the 8th section, 8th Brahmana concludes. So when Shvetaketu heard this, he requests his father, "Sir, please enlighten me again, please instruct me again." And this request, it is called prasna, means. So there are total 8 prasnas and 9 instructions. First instruction is over, and again the student asks for a repetition of what is being taught, and at the end of the 16th section, the Upanishad concludes. So total 9 repetitions, 8 questions, the same instruction. Each time the instruction is further elaborated, described, with a fresh illustration. And we are going to take one of the important illustrations, which underlines the importance of self-effort. The role of a teacher, and how we must ourselves make use of our intelligence, our discretion, even after getting instruction from a teacher. A teacher cannot give you spiritual realization on a platter. You may get instruction, but we have to work hard, make use of our intelligence, and realize the supreme truth. So all these are illustrated in the form of an elaborate dialogue. So I shall just begin the chapter, that is the first Brahmana, first section of the 6th chapter of Chandogya. Swetaketuhu ha aruneya asa Tamka Pita Uvacha Shvetaketu Vasa Brahmacharya Navai Somya Asmat Kulinaga Ananuchya Brahmabandhuhu Iva Bhavati Iti. So we must keep all this in mind. Total 4 Mahavakyas, 4 grand statements which constitute the very essence of Vedanta philosophy. That is Prajnanam Brahma, which is Siddhanta Vakyam or Lakshana Vakyam, which comes in the Aitareya Upanishad, which belongs to Rigveda. Then Chandogya Upanishad Samaveda, Upadesha Vakyam Tat Twam Asi, and Atharva Veda Mandukya Upanishad, which has got Ayam Atma Brahma, which is a Nididhyasana Vakyam or Anusandhana Vakyam, and then Aham Brahmasmi, which comes in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which belongs to Shukla Yajurveda. So in this chapter we are dealing with the Upadesha Vakyam or Tat Twam Asi. So here the story is like this. In ancient times, once upon a time, in a great family of Vedic sages, Uddalaka, the great sage, had gone out of his home, perhaps to teach in some distant hermitages, and returns home after several years. So normally it was a tradition during the Vedic times, when even if the father himself is a great sage and a scholar, still he will send his son to be instructed by another equally great teacher. So he will send his son to a distant hermitage for instruction, normally for 12 years. And then he will return and he will marry, he will start his family life. That was a tradition. And this man, when he gets old, he also will continue the same instruction. He will teach some other students. He may also give preliminary instruction to his own son, but for advanced learning he will send his son to another great teacher in a distant hermitage, forest, Vedic hermitage. So Uddalaka had gone out to some distant provinces to teach Vedas to his disciples. When he returned home, he found his own son Swetaketu had completely neglected his studies. And he felt great pain, because he himself was a great scholar and a sage and instructor and teacher of so many students and brahmacharis and monks. But his own son practically didn't go to school. So it is a source of great grief. So he tells his son, look here Swetaketu, Vasa Brahmacharyam, you should live the life of a brahmachari. Brahmachari means he should live a pure life, studying the Vedas under a great teacher. See, look here, boy, none in our family ever remained without Vedic instruction. If you don't study the Vedas, all that you can say is that your relatives are Brahmins, your parents are Brahmins, your uncle is a Brahmin, but you yourself are not a Brahmin. Because only through Vedic instruction you can be called a Brahmin. Otherwise you are not a Brahmin. So, Vedacharena Viprahmins means Brahmin. Now, to be called a relative of a Brahmin is an insult, which implies two things. First, you belong to a family of Brahmins. It also implies that you are also not a Brahmin. Both are implied. See, somebody tells you, well, your father was a good man. It is not a compliment to you. You won't be very happy. But suppose somebody, but your father was a good man. It is really very painful if somebody tells you that, which implies that your father was a good man. Also that you are not a good man. Similarly, if you belong to a Brahmin family, is an insult. In a way, you know what this means? On the one hand, it means that you belong to a Brahmin family. A fool may think it's a great compliment. It is not a compliment, it's an insult. It implies you are not a Brahmin. You became a Brahmin when you imbibe the Brahminical qualities studying the Vedas. Otherwise you are not. So such a person is to be called Brahma Bandhu or Kshatra Bandhu. A man who is a coward. Kshatriyas are supposed to be brave soldiers. Your relatives are Kshatriyas, mean you are not one. So Brahma, that's why the father tells after his pain, Navai Soumya Asmat Kulinaha Ananuchya. Ananuchya means without getting instruction in the Vedas. Brahma Bandhu, like a Brahma Bandhu. Nobody was in our family who didn't study the Vedas, who were called Brahma Bandhus. They were real Brahmanas, not just Brahma Bandhus. So, the father tells the son that you made a great mistake by neglecting your Vedic studies. Then what happens? Saha dvadasha varsham upetya chadurvimshadi varshaha sarvan vedan aditya mahamana anuchanamani stabdha eva eyaya tamkha pita uvacha Swetaketu yennu soumya idam mahamana anuchanamani stabdha asi uda tam adesham aprakshya. So the father tells the son, when listening to the father's scolding, the son left his home, went to a distant hermitage, studied the Vedas for 12 years and returned. And then the father found the son, Swetaketu, had become so arrogant, so proud of his learning. So stabdha. So it means he has gone, but he has become so obstinate, so haughty, so proud, thinking of himself as a great exponent of the Vedas. Anuchanamani, Mahamana, Sarvan Vedan Aditya. So after studying all the 4 Vedas, he had returned home, and the father found, instead of becoming polite and humble, he has become so proud and haughty because of his learning. So the father brings his son to a sense of propriety. That is how the instruction begins. Yatha soumya ekena lokamadina sarvam lokamayam vijnadam syat vacharam phanam vikaro namadheyam murtikityevas lokamityeva satyam. And like that the instruction continues. The father again tells him, did you study that absolute knowledge? Yena asudam sudam bhavati amadam madam avijnadam vijnadamiti kathun bhagavasadishu bhavati iti. So the teacher tells the father, did you study that supreme truth, the highest knowledge, by knowing which everything becomes known? Ekena murpundena sarvam murmayam vijnadam syad vacharam phanam vikaro namadheyam murtikityeva satyam, etc. There is such a knowledge by knowing which everything becomes known, by hearing which everything becomes heard. There is the essence of supreme knowledge, the knowledge behind all knowledge, the essence of all knowledge. Just as if you can understand the nature of clay, you will understand all the thousands of utensils made of the same clay. If you can understand the nature of a metal, then you can understand the characteristics of all the implements or maybe gadgets made of the same metal. If suppose you know the nature of iron, then you will understand the characteristics of different tools or different agricultural tools or implements made of the same iron. You don't have to take every single tool one after another and analyze it, because you know everything is made of the same metal. Similarly, if you know the supreme spiritual truth, then you will understand the nature of all other branches of learning. Did you learn that from your teacher? Well, the student said, boy said, no, I didn't learn. I never knew there is such a thing as the essence of our knowledge. by knowing which everything that is unknown becomes known. So, the father starts this instruction, and one after another he takes illustrations and drives home the same idea, and he gives various examples. The example of honeybees, the example of our own experiences like deep waking state, dream state, deep sleep state, and so on. But we are now concerned with just one illustration because we have only about an hour or less than an hour. So I have to confine myself to one particular illustration which drives home the importance of the idea of what it means to be a spiritual seeker, how to make use of the instructions, the ideas that we gather from books or from teachers, and how to make proper use of it in our own practical spiritual life. That's the central thing. So we are now going to the 14th khanda, means 14th khanda of the 6th chapter of Chandogya Upanishad. Those of you who are interested can learn later. So those of you who are interested can refer to the book Chandogya Upanishad, khanda 14th, sometimes in some books called book 14th, mantra 1. Now it is in the form of a elaborate instruction, in the form of a story. First I shall tell the story and then I will read out the text and give a detailed exposition. The story is this. Once a person who was returning from India to Gandhara, today's Kandahar in Afghanistan. Afghanistan, Pakistan, all these geographical regions were important centers of Vedic instruction, Vedic culture in ancient times. So, a teacher had come to India and he underwent long instruction in the different branches of learning, and he was returning home to Kandahar, Gandhara Desha. So Gandhara was the name, the ancient Sanskrit name of Kandahar. He was returning home, taking the western route that connected in today's Indo-Gangetic Valley or to Persia and further beyond to Alexandria, like that. So he was taking that route, and as he was returning home to Afghanistan, Gandhara Desha, he was ambushed by a group, by some robbers who attacked him, who took away all his wealth and tied his hands and feet, dragged him into a thick forest and tied him to a tree. Of course, they had taken precautions. They had blindfolded him because the fellow should not be able to escape from there. So these robbers ambushed him, tortured him, blindfolded him, robbed him and took him, dragged him into a thick forest and tied him to a tree. And the robbers went their way. And after some time, this man he regained consciousness, and suddenly he found his sorry plight, and then he started crying and weeping. And a kind-hearted traveler who was taking the same route, returning from Kandahar, or rather coming from Kandahar to India, heard his cries coming from the thick forest. So he went in search of this man. He found a poor fellow who was tied to a tree, completely blindfolded. So he untied him and saved him, brought him to the main road, which will help him to get back to his hometown, Gandhara Desha. And gave him instruction: you should take this road, and that will take you back to your hometown. And he traveled back. He started his journey. Whenever there was a junction, he will ask somebody, some passers-by, and finally he got home. This is the story. The story is very simple, but it contains a great, profound spiritual message. The imagery, the parable, the illustrations, the examples are all marvelous. So I shall read the text and slowly I will explain one after another. Yatha soumya purusham gandharebhyo abhinadhakshamaaniya tam tadu adhijane visrajet sa yatha tatra prangva udangva atharangva pratyangva pratvayida abhinadhaksha anitaha abhinadhaksho visishtaha. Now we have to begin this parable. Uddalaka tells the boy Shvetaketu how to make proper use of instructions from a teacher. Frequently, even the most intelligent person may not be able to fully understand the implications of scriptural instructions. Or maybe even if you read a very good book, you may not be able to fully understand the real implication, the real message of important instructions. So how to understand, how to make proper use of our instruction and learning. Here, to begin with, we have to remember, Gandhara Desha is the place where this man is trying to reach. He's on his way to Gandhara Desha. That is one's soul home. In fact, in all religious traditions, there is one belief that we are coming from perfection and we are returning to perfection. We are coming from a sublime state of spiritual realization that you find in all traditions. Even Satan, the archangel, was expelled from heaven. Adam ate the apple, so he fell from a sublime state of perfection, bliss. And this is the pathetic condition. So, just because Adam ate the apple, the whole humanity becomes race of sinners. And by taking refuge in Jesus, we get out of this sin and we get back to kingdom of God. This is the essence you find in Christianity, in Hinduism also. This life, this embodiment, this birth, all these constitute a state of bondage and imperfection. Something that should be transcended. By realizing the transitoriness of this body, worldly pleasures, we must turn our mind towards a higher spiritual ideal, and through spiritual practices, meditation, ethical moral life, and practice of unselfishness, we should get back to this state of perfection, which is called the realization of God or Brahman in Hinduism. So in all traditions, of course, in Islam, everywhere, in Buddhism, for example, state of nirvana takes you back to a state which is free from trishna, which is the cause of this embodiment, this bondage, pratitya samutpada. The 12 link which constitute the state of bondage. So, when we realize the reality of sorrow, we also realize the nirvana is the way out of this. And for that, Ashtanga Yoga, Ashtanga Marga, Ashtashila Marga sometimes called. Samyak Smriti, Samyak Sankalpa, Samyak Vyayama, Samyak Samadhi, and so on. We get out of this bondage of embodiment, of life in this imperfect world, and get back to nirvana. So, The idea that we are coming from perfection and this life, this intermediary state is a state of imperfection and we are heading towards perfection. This is common in all traditions. So here, this person, the unfortunate man who was robbed and ambushed by robbers, is going towards his hometown. His hometown is the state of our true Atman, our real reality. Bondage is actually alien to us. Our real nature is a state of perpetual bliss, perpetual liberation, a state of eternal mukti or liberation from moksha. So this embodiment, this life, and going through this cycle of life, death and rebirth, going through the pain and pleasure, we become unhappy when there is an unpleasant experience, we become happy when there is a joyful, pleasant experience. These vagaries, this changeable, transitory stage of imperfection should be transcended. And that's how we get back to our home. So, his hometown is a state of eternal spiritual liberation, state of blissfulness. Now, who are these robbers? These robbers are the results of our actions. Whatever we do with a sense of attachment, with a definite motive, that creates a result, we call adrishtam, that binds us to this world. If our actions produce happy result, then we become attached to that action and its result. If our actions produce unhappy result, then we become averse towards that. So raga and dvesha, attachment and aversion, pain and pleasure, all these vagaries, changing phenomena, they are the thieves. And now, in the story I told you, this poor man was ambushed, robbed, and he was blindfolded. What is this blindfold? It is a state of desire. When we get trapped, when we become attached, when we become obsessed with the external sensory pleasures, we forget our own reality and we become completely deluded and we get trapped. When there is an unfortunate, unpleasant event, we lose our balance because we forget the fact that this unpleasant experience is not going to be there for all time. When something happy, when a very pleasant, happy experience comes, then also we lose our balance. We become overjoyed, forgetting the fact that this happy situation will not continue forever. So every time we forget the momentariness of this empirical phenomena, these empirical experiences. So we become attached or we become averse. To attachment and aversion, raga and dvesha, pain and pleasure, these experiences come and go. So human life becomes like a tiny boat that is tossed over the mighty waves of these vagaries. Sometimes we are forced to open our eyes. Sometimes it takes a tragic, shocking experience to persuade us to open our eyes And then we suddenly go to a library, read a book on mysticism, something we read. Or maybe we may go to a place where spiritual instructions, spiritual ideas are instructed or taught and discussed. We go for meditation, taught. But we don't sit back and think, well, what exactly is the real cause of these problems? So we frequently forget the one fact that these empirical experiences are relative, they are non-eternal, they are transitory, they are not everlasting. So this delusion, this ignorance is the cloth with which our eyes are blindfolded. Now what about the forest? The forest is our own body. And the robbers use a rope to tie the hands and feet of the poor man. This rope with which the robbers tie the poor fellow is nothing but our desire for sensory pleasures. And then who is the teacher? The teacher is Acharya. The teacher sometimes the teacher may be in the form of a book that you read suddenly that opens your eyes. You may listen to a lecture. The teacher need not necessarily be a human being, but frequently is a teacher who comes and instructs you and tells you where you have wrong and how to get back to the right road that will take you back to your hometown. Now, when this poor man was ambushed, blindfolded, bound and dragged into a thick forest and tied to a tree, the robbers go away. And this man suddenly starts crying and weeping. Shankaracharya gives me some very graphic illustrations of all this in his Bhashya. So, this poor fellow starts crying and weeping. That's because he wants to get out of this thick forest. Sometimes, people don't make any effort for starting spiritual life. They are like a fellow who is tied, drugged and blindfolded and dragged into a thick forest and tied to a tree, who say, oh, this is a very wonderful, happy situation. So many people sometimes do not realize the state of bondage even when they are within the bondage. Sri Ramakrishna in the Gospel says, you catch fish. Some clever fish can't be caught. They jump out of the net. But some fish who think they are actually more clever than the other ones, they sit quiet, think it is a very wonderful place to sit within the net. Because they do not know they are going to be killed and eaten. So like that, sometimes people do not make much effort to get out of the state of bondage and move towards a state of liberation. So even to realize the state of bondage, we need some degree of spiritual growth and evolution. In fact, that is the thin line of demarcation between enlightened people and others. When you reach a particular state of evolution, you need not necessarily be a spiritual seeker, perhaps. Still, if you are a cultured, enlightened, civilized human being, at one stage, you will naturally ask the question, well, what happens to me after some time? Some people will need a shocking experience, but the intelligent people won't wait for that. Even before that, they will ask the question. Well, all this bank balance, all the status, position, reputation, high-paying job, well, they are not going to last for long. Those who can realize this fact earlier can avoid the shocking experience that's going to come later. So the cries, the weeping, this man, see, these robbers have caught me, they robbed me, they left me in this thick forest. This man is weeping and crying. Without this, the good-hearted traveler, the kind-hearted traveler will not know there is a poor man suffering who is tied to a tree in the thick forest. The teacher is the traveler, kind-hearted traveler, who is traveling along the same road. He is coming back from Gandhara Desha. He hears this noise coming from the unfortunate person who is tied to a tree in the thick forest. But this unfortunate person should make some noise, otherwise the kind-hearted traveler won't take any notice of him. Because he is right inside the thick forest, inside the thick forest. So he has to make some effort. Unless he makes some effort, the kind-hearted traveler, the teacher, cannot come to the rescue, come to where he is tied, where he is lying, and untie him, remove his blindfold, and bring him, guide him to the main road, and instruct him, you take this road, you will get back to your hometown. So even to make proper use of instruction or the knowledge that we get from books or lectures, we have to attain some level of spiritual fitness. It's called, you cannot make use of God's grace unless you become grace-worthy. So without achieving grace-worthiness, God's grace is not going to help you. As I said in the last class I mentioned, the famous illustration you find in the first volume of Centuries of Abhilas, autobiographical writings. So she gives the illustration of a farmer, very similar to this, at least in some ways, not completely of course. She gives the illustration of a farmer. The farmer is trying to irrigate a field, and of course she writes like this. She wrote in the medieval times, the farmer can make use of a water mill, can dig a canal through which he can bring water from the nearby river or a pond, or he can use buckets to bring water and irrigate the field. That's true. But then, before doing all these, he should make the field ready. Right now the field is not ready. The field is full of pebbles, stones, weeds and grass. Without removing them, if he irrigates the field, he won't get any crop. He'll get only grass and weeds. And even if God's grace comes in the form of heavy rains, it's not going to help him at all. So first of all, he should make his field ready. If God suddenly appears before you, you may think, yes, come to attend this retreat. You won't recognize him as God. So unless we attain some level of spiritual fitness, we won't be able to make use of any of these instructions, or anything. Otherwise, the whole nature itself becomes an open book from which we can learn, as I mentioned in the last session. So, this man who is tied, who dragged into thick forest, has to make some noise. He should first of all realize his state of bondage as a state of bondage. He should not mistake his state of bondage as a state of blissfulness. If that happens, he will never be liberated. So that's how the story proceeds. Okay, now here, so this man is tied and he is brought into an uninhabited place. Tataha adijani visrjit sayatha tatra prangva udangva adharangva pratyangva. He would cry, and we may walk to the east and west and north inside the forests. But it won't help him. Then what should he do? He shouts, Abhinadhaksho Visishtaha. Padmayita Abhinadhaksha Anitaha Abhinadhaksho Visishtaka. And ambushed, I was robbed by the robbers from the main street. And then Abhinadhaksha means he is completely blindfolded, bandaged. I can't see anything. I am helpless. So he makes this noise. Hearing this noise, the kind-hearted person enters the forest and comes to his rescue. Now Shankaracharya describes this in his graphic style. Yatha ayam drishtando varnitaha svishayebhyo gandharebhyo purushaka taskarehi abhinadhaksho aviveko dingmoto asnaya pibasadiman Vyaghra taskaradi anega bhaya anartha vrada idam aranyam praveshido dukkharto vikrosyan bandhanebhyo mumukshusthishtadi sakas kathanchideva karunegena kenachit mokshitaha sudeshan gandharaneva apannaha nirvurtaha sukhi apu. This is the bhashya. So he says. Now in this illustration, this man was dragged by the robbers into the thick forests, and his eyes are bandaged. So what happens? When your eyes are blindfolded, you are not able to see. Similarly, in real life, we can sometimes become blindfolded. We are open to the realities of the world, but we become blind to the reality of spiritual life. So that's what really happens. We become awake to every single aspect of material pleasure, empirical life. We become extremely careful, very, very efficient. We make use of our intelligence and faculties for making life comfortable in this material plane. But we become completely blindfolded. We become asleep, unaware, so far as the reality of spiritual life is concerned. And what is this blindfold? As I said earlier, when we become obsessed with the momentary pleasures, then we become blindfolded. Shankaracharya continues. So, Deharanyam Vada Pittha Kapha Rudhira Medo Mamsa Asti Majja Sukla Mutra etc. The whole body is described here. Bharya Putra Mitra Pashu Bindhwadi Dushta Anega Vishetrishna Pashitaha Punyadi Taskare Praveshitaha Aham Amushya Putro Mamayidai Bandhavaha Sukhi Aham Dukhi Aham Mudha Pandita Dharmigo Bindhuma Jado Murdo etc. This is very interesting description. Now we are caught in this body. Body is not to be neglected, Shankaracharya is not criticizing the role of the body. Body has a very important role to play. This body itself can become a wonderful instrument in our hands for attaining the highest in spiritual life. In fact, in Kalidasa's Kumara Sambhava, there is an interesting scene where Shiva takes the form of a brahmachari and tries to test Uma, who is doing tapasya. He says, Apikriyatham sulabham samikkusham jalani vishnani vidhikshamaniti apisvashaktya tapasi pravartasi sariramantyam khalu dharma sadhana. The sharira, this body itself becomes mukhyam, that is Mallinatha's commentary, means dharma sadhana. This body itself is the most prominent tool, instrument in our hands. Not just to make use of the sensory pleasures available around, but also to go beyond embodiment, to go beyond body consciousness. This body itself shows us the limitations of embodiment. The body doesn't contain anything which we'll be happy to display outside. It is nothing but a bag of skin according to Vedanta. It is not a negativistic interpretation. But it tells us that there is something higher than this body. So the body itself can become a useful instrument for spiritual practices, for doing noble deeds, for practicing unselfishness, for practicing the highest spiritual brotherhood, for all spiritual qualities. To practice those spiritual qualities, we need a healthy body. That is why Kalidasa says, Shariram Adyamik Mukhyam Dharma Sadhana. It's an instrument for practice of Dharma. True. But at the same time, if we sometimes interpret our own individuality as nothing other than a physical body, then embodiment, a body becomes a source of bondage. Otherwise, this human psychophysical mechanism itself becomes a useful, a sublime instrument for spiritual liberation, for doing noble deeds, for practicing the highest spiritual qualities, morality and ethical values. At the same time, when we interpret ourselves as nothing other than this physical, psychophysical mechanism, when we think there is nothing beyond this body to be cared for, then it becomes a great bondage. Then what happens? We become proud of what wealth we have got. We become proud of our relatives, our friends, and our possessions. That's why, Aham Amusya Putro Mamayidi Bandhava is my son, they are my relatives, all this money, this wealth, everything belongs to me. So I am great because I am healthy. I am this physical body. This becomes a bondage. And this becomes the blindfold, the cloth with which our eyes are blindfolded. That is what Shankaracharya says. Now again, at one time, God Himself plays a trick with us for our good, for our benefit. There is a famous verse in one of the devotion classics. Yasya anugraham ichchami tasya vittam haramiham bandhavaisya viyogena brisham bhavati dukkhidah tena dukkhena samtapto yadi mam na parityajit tad prasadam karishyami yad devairavi sudurlabham. This is a statement. Suppose we become too much attached to our wealth or our people, and we completely forget any higher spiritual ethical values. And if God has some grace for you, if you have done something good in the past life or in this life, so you deserve God's grace, then what happens? God removes you from the path of your obstacles, or He removes all the obstacles from your path. That's why literally the verse means Tasya vittam harami. Yasya anugraham ichchami tasya vittam harami. If a person is a trillionaire or billionaire and becomes so obsessed with his wealth, so he becomes a slave of his money and wealth. An animal, nothing but an animal who lives by his wealth, and he thinks that's the only thing to be attained in his life. And if he had done some great good spiritual sadhanas in the past, then God will turn him into a pauper. Not a very happy situation. But God does this only if He has some grace for you. If God has no soft corner for you, He will let you go ahead with whatever you have got to play. Again, if you become so proud of our following or our friends, our influence, and we become completely forgetful of our higher spiritual goal, then God will get you completely isolated from your friends. Still, if you continue a spiritual quest, then God will elevate you to a higher position. So this is what happens. So, in this case you find the place of God's grace, human effort, and how to make proper use of instructions from a teacher. All these ideas are explained in depth here. First, we must attain grace worthiness to make use of God's grace. We must also make our mind ready for understanding the true implications of spiritual life. And then finally, when we reach a state of complete harmony of self-will, human effort on the one hand, and God's grace on the other, then we make spiritual progress. So here, the illustration doesn't end here. The verse says, what happens when this man is brought to the main road from the thick forest? Going back to the Upanishad verse. The teacher brings him slowly, removes his bondage, unties the ropes, removes the blindfold, guides him to the main road, which will take him back to his hometown. Then the teacher tells him, says, Edam disham Gandhara, Edam disham Vraja. This way you have to move, you have to travel, if you want to reach your hometown. Then what should the spiritual seeker do? Gramad gramam prichan pandido medhavi Gandhara neva upasampatyeda. He should make use of his own intelligence after getting instruction from the teacher, from the kind-hearted traveler. Sometimes on the way back to his hometown, he may reach a junction, 3-4 roads meeting. Then he should know which road he should take. So he should have the intelligence, the power of proper discrimination, means he can have a discerning mind. What should be the right path? He should not be distracted by the wonderful sights around on both sides of the streets. When he walking, there are some wonderful things to be seen. He should not suddenly get distracted and get himself distracted from the main road. He should stick to his road. We must stick to our spiritual path. And then we should be able to ask people. See, Grama Prichan. You find many other people returning from that place. There are other great spiritual seekers with whom we can discuss spiritual matters, and that will benefit us very much. Just as a traveler who is returning home to Gandhara Desha, to his hometown, he doesn't know which road to take because the teacher had instructed him, but the other teacher has gone his way. Now he has to depend upon his own intelligence, his own power, discerning mind, his own shraddha, faith, and a strong sense of propriety. So he should ask people, which way should take? What does it mean? We must read books, we must associate with people which are helpful in our spiritual life. We must make use of our mind and the 5 senses of perception for feeding our own mind with spiritual ideas. Books can be a great help in our spiritual life. That is called Swadhyaya is very important. Reading of books which are helpful in spiritual life. And also, that's why Grama Prichan, he should ask. You should associate yourself with fellow spiritual travelers, fellow spiritual seekers. We should associate with like-minded people who are also interested in spiritual life. That will help us, that give us new light, help us in our own spiritual journey. For that, he should have a pure intelligence. His mind should be pure, medhavi. He should have a discerning mind. Then he will be able to make use of holy associations. There may be other travelers who are heading to the same direction, we can travel with them. So in spiritual life, we must associate with fellow spirituals, pilgrims. If we associate with people who are moving the opposite direction, we will be lost. That's why the beginning of spiritual life, association is very important. Association only with people who are like-minded, who are also interested in spiritual life, as we are interested. If we make use of all these faculties, we will reach the destination, spiritual goal. So now we will have interaction. I think we don't have, I've already taken enough time. Now we will have interaction maybe. So
we'll have interaction the next session.
Next session? So I can continue for some time? Or this time is over, I think?
The time is over.
Okay.
It's up to you.
Then we will have interaction. After 2 o'clock we will have interaction.
The other session we can have interaction.
Yeah. So you can...
If you want to conclude, anything else you want to conclude?
No, it's over.
Okay.
No, during interaction we can continue the discussion.